Support for this podcast comes from Frito-Lay in the 2023 Snack Bracket Championship. The Frito-Lay Snack-It Challenge is underway, and fans are voting on their favorite snacks to crown champion. We're talking about prime-time matchups between the best 64 snacks in the land. Will Ruffles Ridges reign supreme? Can Doritos defend their dynasty? Or will Smart Food use their smarts for a surprise upset? Only you can decide. Get in on all the action for a chance to win up to $1,000 or a year's worth of snacks. Let your snacks be heard. Just go to fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com to vote and enter for a chance to win. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends April 3rd, 2023. Void where prohibited. Year's worth of snacks awarded in the form of 52 coupons, each good for one bag of chips. See official rules at fritolaysnacket.sbnation.com.
Hello again, Night fans. Welcome to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff, Sharon, Eric Lopez with you once again for, well, I guess this is kind of sort of another emergency podcast, but it's really going to be more like our regular podcast, except a little bit shorter. Hopefully you've listened to our first emergency podcast, which we unleashed on Monday night, having to do as a preview of the men's basketball game against in the NIT against Colorado. We're going to talk about the women's basketball team that when we released the podcast last night, we didn't know who they were playing. Now we know. And we're going to talk about that. And we're also going to wrap up some baseball and some softball while we're at it here as well. Eric Lopez is with me. What's going on, Eric?
I like to call it a night after dark edition. You know, it's night after dark. We're just kind of behind the scene, you know, late night with the nights. You know, it's kind of it's a lot of late night news that we got to jump into.
All right, so it's a busy time of year. So if you want to catch up with us, make sure you do so by subscribing to this podcast on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and TuneIn. Don't forget to follow us at blackandgoldbanneret.com. You can also follow us at UCF_Banneret on Twitter, also on Facebook. Just search for Black and Gold Banneret. We're also on Google+, and you can look me up at Jeff_Sharon on Twitter, and you can look Eric up at Eric Lopez Elo. All right, Eric, let's dive in. We talked about the men's basketball team yesterday in that first emergency podcast. Now let's talk about the women's team, where literally it felt like minutes after we released this podcast, of course, they released who the opponent is, and it's going to be Stetson.
I believe I had that one.
Yeah, you did have that one, and congratulations to you. Lynn Bria's Stetson Hatters, the former UCF head coach, who was the coach at UCF prior to Gail Striegler, if I'm not mistaken, is now the
96-99. Yeah,
is now the head coach at Stetson. Has been for quite some time now. She started at Stetson in 2008, 2009. She has won, or Stetson rather, has won 20 games at least, 7 consecutive years under her tutelage. They've won 2 Atlantic Sun titles, been to 2 NCAAs under her. This is their 4th WNIT. She set the school record for wins back in 2013, 2014. Lynn Bria has set up a pretty good program at Stetson, something that we know about, because she coached at UCF for 3 years. Won ASUN Coach of the Year, NCAA tournament in 1999 with UCF. So she's, since coming over to Stetson from Ohio, which is where she was which is where she went after UCF. This is a pretty good Stetson team, isn't it?
Oh, it really is. I'm a fan of her work. Obviously, they're coming off a disappointing loss, though, Jeff. They were at home hosting the ASUN championship game against Florida Gulf Coast. And I know, for people that haven't followed it, Stetson and Florida Gulf Coast has been going at it for years in the ASUN in the last, I would say, 5 years.
Really,
and
since
Florida
FGCU joined the ASUN, they have.
Yeah. And Florida Gulf Coast has kind of had their number. They would always win the regular season title, which as a result, they would host the conference tournament and win it. And that's been and Stetson has been the runner-up, if you will, the last handful of years. Well, this year Stetson went on a hot streak right at the end of the year and caught Florida Gulf Coast and actually beat Florida Gulf Coast in the last game of the regular season in Fort Myers to capture the regular season championship, the first one that she brought at Stetson. And so they finally got a chance to host the semifinals and the championship, and they hosted Florida Gulf Coast. They had, I believe, a 9-point lead at one point in the fourth quarter and lost it, unfortunately. So a crushing loss. And the reason I bring that up is that's going to be the question to me about Stetson. Where are they mentally going to be going into the NIT against UCF from the standpoint? That was a crushing loss. They were so close to their first, and you know that program pretty well. You've been around it a little bit as well, and I've been, and I like Lynn. I've gotten a chance to know Lynn, and she's a tremendous coach, tremendous person. I was rooting for her to win that tournament. So I'm curious how the players are going to react. Now, the advantage is that game was Sunday, so they would have had 3 days kind of to get over it, if you will. But I do wonder what their mindset will be going into this game at UCF, coming off such a tough loss. Whereas for UCF, I mean, they're coming off a 7-win season last year. So the fact they're in postseason, they're ecstatic to play. And I think that's going to be the fascinating thing to look for. Plus, Stetson's a very up-tempo team, likes to shoot the three. That'll be a good matchup against UCF's defense. It's a very attractive game.
Another interesting point, I think, I think is kind of what you were getting to regarding UCF. UCF's run in their conference tournament ended at the hands of UConn. And I think if we gave everyone, kind of sodium pentothal and asked them what they thought about that, they would probably tell you, yeah, we pretty much thought that was going to happen. But you know what? Easy for us to get over it because we know UConn was a better team than us. And Stetson, I think, comes off, like you said, bitter disappointment in the ASUN championship because they feel like they're better than Florida Gulf Coast, and they lost, and they lost at home, even more difficult to swallow from that perspective. So I think UCF does have the advantage there. Obviously, the Knights have the extra advantage playing at home. I think what's interesting about this is that this game is being played on a Thursday, and like you predicted, our friends at UCF are kind of scrambling to kind of get staffing set for this game because a lot of them are going to be split down at the Amway Center working those games for the NCAA tournament that night. So there's going to be a lot of Stetson folk who are going to be helping UCF out in terms of hosting this game, and I think that does show, when push comes to shove, these two schools do work together well. And it's a pretty tight-knit community, especially when you talk to the communications staff. They all really know each other. In fact, Dan, who's the SID for UCF men's basketball, he used to work at Stetson actually at a time when I was doing some work there too. And then he came over to UCF, and that was really and so we knew each other at that time. So, but again, Lynn bringing in Stetson coming to town against UCF. This is going to be a good coaching test for her, don't you think, considering what you were just talking about, how this team gets ready? Oh,
yeah, it'll be a challenge. If anybody can get them up, it'll be Lynn, but it'll be a big challenge. Now, I know you've been talking to your sources about, as far as the Thursday night game situation. I was surprised, obviously, when they announced it Thursday. And I'm going to be completely honest. This will not be a popular opinion. I was disappointed that they decided to play the schedule it on Thursday night. Because I actually was looking forward to seeing this game. I cannot go on Thursday night, and there's going to be, because I have obligations. I have to go, and I'm going to cover the NCAA tournament for the radio station Sports Talk 1080. So, job comes first. It's interesting to your point, and it makes sense. It's not an accident that UCF and Stetson are playing because, as you mentioned, they work together. They're going to be working together as a staff in the NCAA tournament. They did 2 years ago. They did, I'm sure they are this year, and I'm sure they can help each other out with getting through the women's basketball game on Thursday. Let me bring up a topic that we have brought up in a past podcast episode, though, and this is what I would have liked to have seen. And I don't know if you got an answer to this or even, asked the question or not. And I'm wondering, why not? Could they have not have played the women's game before the men's game on Wednesday? Why couldn't we have done a doubleheader? Why not do a women's game at 5, let's say, and do the men's at 7:30? Because I think you would have had some fans that would have made it out there prior to the men's game. We've seen this in the past with doubleheaders. Hey, we'll come out, catch some of the women's game, and then go to the men's. Last year, in the regular season, UCF played at Stetson, and it was a doubleheader. They played the women's game first,
right,
and the men's game was following that. They both were on ESPN3, if I remember correctly. And I went to both. I covered those two games. It was a lot of fun. And I was hoping they would do something to that extent once I knew that the men's were playing on Wednesday night. Was that ever a consideration, and what did you hear?
I think that it probably was a consideration, and I think what happened was actually it goes back to what you talked about how the women's NIT is not owned by the same organization that owns the men's NIT, which is basically a joint venture between ESPN and the NCAA now. And because you have these two ownership groups that are essentially in competition for airtime, that's what prevented that from happening. The women's NIT is like, no, we need to have this game on a separate day to accommodate all of the things that we have to do. And so they said, okay, well, this is going to be tough, but we're going to have to pull it off somehow. So it'll be difficult, for UCF. I mean, it won't be easy, but I mean, they're going to do it. We all know that. We know that the folks who work at UCF are total professionals in the arena, and they're going to be able to pull off. I agree with you. I'm kind of disappointed that it wasn't a doubleheader situation, but I understand. It's not as though there weren't people who are trying to make that happen. It's just that I think it was beyond anyone's control.
Oh, and the problem too, Friday, as we've talked about in the previous podcast before, obviously Friday's a busy deal with youth softball hosting number 14 ranked Baylor, baseball's hosting Jacksonville, so it's not like Friday is an easy day either as far as to host that game on a Friday because you have a lot of stuff going on anyway. So it was interesting. Once the men got announced for Wednesday, you knew that the women, that was going to be interesting. How are they going to be able to pull that off? And they decided on Thursday, and it'll go over well. You're right. It'll go off well. It's just very difficult, and this is not a UCF issue. Again, this goes back to one of the many issues I think women's basketball has, and this is kind of an example. You're going to play your women's NIT game on Thursday on the opening day of the men's college basketball tournament. That's why, honestly, Jeff, the women's basketball across the board doesn't get a lot of notice.
Yeah, but I mean, the other part about that's tough is that, you're there are only 7 days in the week, oh, no, I agree. I agree with you. 6 of them are filled up with the NCAA tournament when you consider the fact that the women's tournament and the men's tournament take place. They also overlap. So,
well, the thing that I would do, and maybe we'll get into it in a future podcast, I think women's basketball needs to consider doing kind of what baseball and softball did. Baseball and softball, have enough separation. They separate themselves by a week. So, for example, and the way the seasons play out, like, for example, when the regionals are going on in softball, it's usually right around the last weekend of the baseball season. And then this, having been in Clearwater for the conference tournament, that's usually going around when the softball's in the super regional. So, in other words, there's a bit of a week or two gap in their seasons. They're not literally going head to head the College World Series and the men is going on at the same time as the women. They have their own block. And I think women's basketball needs to consider doing that, whether it means starting their tournament earlier, a week or two earlier than the men, or starting a week or two later than the men. I think that needs to be addressed across the board of the sport if they want to get more attention, because if not, as long as it's the way it's set up, the men's is always going to get and that's obviously a more popular sport, so it's going to get more notoriety, and you're always going to be going head to head, and that's a battle you can't win. So that's the unfortunate thing about it, because I think this is a fantastic matchup. I think Stetson UCF is a fantastic game, and I think, Jeff, under normal circumstances, I think they would draw a pretty good crowd.
I think so too. I think that the other thing though is that when you think about like who's actually going to go to this game, I don't think that there's a lot of overlap in the Venn diagram between people who are going to attend the games at the Amway Center and people who are going to attend this game.
No, that's a fair point. I mean, that's a fair point. The fan bases are completely different. You're absolutely right. People that go to the women's basketball, for the most part, are different than the people that go to a men's basketball game. There's a few. There's a few that would go to both. I mean, I would be one of them in theory. True. You would be one of them. But you're right. The masses, but the numbers have proven that out. That obviously, let's be honest. I mean, the men's game will draw X amount, and only a certain amount of that will go to the women's game in basketball. There's definitely a bigger gap there as compared to, for example, baseball and softball, where there's a much closer number, where there's a lot of people that go to softball but go to baseball as well. So it is what it is. It's tough. But certainly, again, the bottom line is it sets up an interesting game, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it plays out. And, for UCF, they're in the draw. We haven't touched on that. I mean, if they were to win, they could be potentially playing Georgia Tech over across the weekend in the women's NIT in the second round. Obviously, you got to get past Stetson. That won't be easy, but it's an interesting draw.
Yeah, I'm looking at the draw right now. Let's see. Where did I actually see us a second ago? I thought we.
By the way, Georgia Tech, just like UCF, in the NIT in both the men's and the women, which is very interesting on that. And it's very interesting. It's very interesting.
What I find interesting, you have on the other side of this bracket, you have Georgia Tech and Jacksonville, another team from the A-Sun.
Yeah.
Winner of that game plays the winner of UCF and Stetson. And then the other 4-team pod matched up with UCF's pod is Middle Tennessee, Morehead State, and Wake Forest at home against Bethune-Cookman.
This is kind of closer to a region that you've talked about. You were a little surprised where, so in a comparison, the men were like complete, Colorado and Illinois State and UC Irvine. Whoa,
I can make an argument for the women. I can make an argument for a bunch of Southern teams. Really, the furthest north team you have is Morehead State, which is in Kentucky. Right. Everybody else is pretty much a Southern team, where the men's NIT seem kind of a little haphazard. I think the field's, it is what it is. I think that if UCF gets hot, there's no telling what could happen. The NIT is always a crapshoot anyway. The championship game, by the way, is scheduled to be held on April the 1st at a campus site on CBS Sports Network. If you go to womensNIT.com, you'll find all the information. Just a couple quick notes that I wanted to get out on Stetson. They have the second leading scorer in the Atlantic Sun in Saunders, Brianti Saunders, who averaged 16 points a game, 37.2% from three-point range. He's an excellent shooter. They have the leading rebounder in the conference in Sarah Sagerer, who averages 10.7 points and 8.9 rebounds a game. And in addition, they also have Brianna Bay, a forward, who is also among one of the leaders. She's actually tops in the A-Sun in field goal percentage. She shoots 57% from the field, 12 points and 6 rebounds a game. So this is a very good Stetson team that, like I said, we're going to be playing. And also a pretty good deal for UCF. General admission for this game on Thursday night, tip-off at 7 p.m. in CFE Arena is going to be $7. Kids get in for $5. Students free, which is awesome. Tickets for Thursday night. And, one last note I wanted to bring up. UCF coming in. Let's give Stetson their due. Like I said, 26-6 record, 13.
Really good team. Really good team. Fun team to watch. I've watched them. They're a fun team to watch. Coach Bria and company. And she's got a lot of friends within the UCF community.
She's got she just picked up a 5-year extension.
Yep.
Last summer, so she's locked up at Stetson until 2021. But at the same token, UCF this season, we talked about how good their record was at 20-11, and we got 2 seniors who are going to be playing in the postseason for the first time. Zy Lewis, and Jocelyn Massey, and it's our chance to send them out with a win. I think it would be great for them to, if this is their last home game, to head out with a win against an old rival in Stetson, going back to the old A-Sun days.
Tempo is going to be a key in this game. Stetson likes to push the ball. UCF, this will be an interesting game. Very dynamic game. Stetson can stretch you out with their shooters. Like I said, very interesting X's and O's matchup and between the two teams. And it'll be interesting. They didn't play in the regular season this year. They played last year in DeLand. Stetson won that game. It'll be interesting to see if maybe we see these two teams play in the regular season in the near future on that. Let me ask you quick, and this will be a good segue. NIT, obviously, as you mentioned, the women's NIT.
By the way, first time UCF women's basketball's been to the WNIT in program history.
Right. It's the first time they've made the postseason as an at-large in a postseason. Remember, all the times they made NCAAs because they won the automatic bid in a conference tournament, whether it be Conference USA or the A-Sun.
Right.
But this is a new trend here, Jeff, and I want to discuss. And, the men's obviously has always had the NIT, which is run by the NCAA. The women's NIT in basketball, as you mentioned, is now not run by the NCAA. But this has become the new trend across the board. We had, and for full disclosure, in Tuesday's Iowa State softball broadcast, I was joined by associate coach Jenny Maurer for UCF, and she talked about the big story
for the volleyball
so far
team,
in the off season, right, for volleyball, is that volleyball will be having their version of the NIT Not sure yet if that's going to be involved with the NCAA or not. It might be similar to what women's basketball is going on with the NIT. And then softball this year also has their version of the NIT that's not associated necessarily with the NCAA. It's run by Triple Crown. So we're starting to see all these other sports, Jeff, going with the NIT, which format here now. So in softball, for example, there's an NIT. In volleyball, it looks like there's going to be an NIT, which is fascinating, Jeff, because we saw the American Conference in volleyball. A team like UCF just missed out. Temple, a team we saw, just missed out. And now those teams that just missed the NCAA after having a great year, winning 20-plus games, will have an opportunity at least for postseason.
I think the driving force behind that is demand on the part of the coaches. The coaches understand that, there's a certain level of disappointment, obviously, when your season just suddenly abruptly ends, but you still have young players that you want to develop. Coaches want to coach, and they want to get their play. If they're not going to win the national championship, they want as many opportunities to develop young players as they possibly can. Given that, given the chance. So I think that's why it's not so much fan demand as in, if we're seeing NIT style tournaments, sort of second banana tournaments in sports other than basketball, and we're seeing actually more, second and third, and in some cases fourth banana tournaments like the CIT in the men's game. It's because there's demand on the part of the coaches. They said, we'll put up the games. There's also programming, television programming inventory to be had. And I think so that's part of it. They can deliver on that, and and remember, these sports are relatively inexpensive to put on. It's not like, football, which is a highly expensive sport, to put on. Softball, volleyball, men's and women's basketball, by comparison, not very expensive to operate. And so if you have that demand by the coaches to, hey, let's provide more opportunities for our players to play and get better, that I think is the driving force. And that shows to you, and that shows, I think, all of us, the power that coaches really do have in college sports these days, particularly in basketball and in the Olympic sports as well. What do you think?
I agree. I think the big question moving forward and the key in all this is going to be the finance side of things. With softball and volleyball, let's focus on those two. Because you have to put a bid in to host, for example. It depends on the rules. You got to bid a certain amount to host. You got to bid a certain amount just to be in. And the CBI in basketball, it's very controversial because you got to put money in just to get into the tournament. So there's
that's
a business
why not everyone
side.
goes who probably can.
Exactly. And there's some teams that will turn down, right? They'll turn down the situation. So that's going to be the big question. Softball and volleyball, if they come with this, is how much are the administrations and the universities going to be able to back up the volleyball program and say, yeah, we're going to spend money for you to host or play in an NIT, same in softball, like they are in basketball. Basketball, as you know, Jeff, has more money that backing, if you will, right? Because women's basketball, that's going to be the interesting question to follow.
It depends on the amount of investment that you would have to make in order to break even. I mean, there are teams that that pay the money to play in the CBI, and the reason why is because they calculate that, hey, if we get one more home game out of this, even though we put up X number of dollars, we'll get X plus Y number of dollars out of it. So we'll end up making money. That's why they do it. In those tournaments where they have to pay to get in. In the tournaments where they don't have to pay to get in, there's the obvious focus of, let's get our players more playing time. Let's get our players more time to develop. I don't think that's a bad thing, personally. In particular, if you're a coach, and again, this goes back to the power of the coaches. So I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, some people complain about oversaturation, but the people who complain about oversaturation are fans who probably aren't going to go to the games anyway. I'm not going to complain about oversaturation because if I get to see more basketball, more UCF basketball, more UCF volleyball, more UCF softball, all the better as far as I'm concerned.
And you know what? Those fans that say that, and I've run into those, I feel are hypocrites. You know why? Because those are the same fans that enjoy, we got to make a bowl game. Let me ask you this. What's the difference between, I don't know, I would say, how many? I don't even know. I've lost track. There's like 40 bowl games now, 41?
40 plus.
I would make the argument that about 5 of them are the equivalent to an NIT. Tell me why I'm wrong. I mean, they're basically consolation games.
I can't tell you. I think you're 100%
There's really only a handful of games. So I laugh at people that say, I'm not excited about the NIT or this or that. But yet, you're excited about the X bowl game, blank bowl game. Like, are you kidding me?
Idaho Potato Bowl?
Right. Get out of here. It's the NIT. All these, like 95% of these bowl games are NIT games.
Plus, I hate to break it to the fans, but it's not for the fans. It's for the players.
Well, and that's a good point you bring up because here's the thing, and this is the other reason you didn't bring this up about the coaches and the power. Yes, about more game. It's also more practice time.
Yeah,
you got to get more practice time, more reps. For a young team that can make a difference. We talk a lot about that in football, right? All the really for the football. Let's be honest. I think if you deep down ask the coaches, a lot of these coaches about what these bowl games. It's more about the practice, the 15 practices they get.
George O'Leary said that. He flat out said that. He's like, it's important that we get to bowl. When UCF was trying to become a team that every year had a chance to go to a bowl game, it used to be that a bowl game was a treat for us. And he said it's important that we get to this and we get into a conference that where we can go to a bowl game every year because we need the extra practice time. We need the extra 2 weeks of practice.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's the same in basketball. And I think you're seeing the same in softball and volleyball, why they're going in that direction. Because coaches are like, I need the more time. You know what? We weren't good enough to make the NCAA, but let's go into this tournament, get some extra practice time that'll pay off in the following year. I think that's another aspect of all this. But for people that suggest, I don't the NIT, I'm excited. Well, then don't be excited about when your team goes to the Shreveport Independence Bowl or whatever. All right, I don't want to hear it because it's the same nonsense. So I find the hypocrisy hilarious that people think that these bowl games are like this. They're the NIT. Like I said, outside of maybe 4 bowl games, maybe, and that's being generous. It's the NIT, really, especially now with the playoff system. Really, if you really want to extreme it, I would argue that the playoffs really are the only games that would really are the ones that everybody shoots for. And then if you don't make the playoffs, everybody else is playing in the NIT.
Yeah. And I'm glad you made the point about practice because, like we said, people forget. There's only a certain number of days, a certain number of contact hours that coaches can have with their players.
Yes.
And so when you get more of that, that is gravy. That is golden. That's how you become a better coach is you get more time to play with your team in a situation where you can have them, practice more. And if that happens to be for the WNIT or the CIT or the CBI or the volleyball NIT, then so be it as far as I'm concerned. That's why the coaches want it, and that's why it happens.
Absolutely. And like I said, I understand, obviously, in football, not everybody could play for the playoff. Let's be honest. The American Conference champion more than likely will never play in the playoff under the current system. So the goal you're shooting for is to make the best possible bowl game, the all-access and all that. And that's fine. That's good. That's the level to shoot for. But at the end of the day, it's postseason, one way or the other. Doesn't matter. It's December 21st, January 1st. They're all postseason, but it's consolation like the NIT is and the NCAA. The difference is the NCAA tournaments, you're playing for a championship. You're trying to get as deep into the postseason run. And so I agree. I'm all for it. I don't have a problem with it. I just hope, Jeff, that the universities and administrations back softball and volleyball programs if they're good enough, if they've earned an opportunity to make postseason NIT and not turn their back on them because they don't invest the money in those programs like they do in basketball. That's my only concern.
I agree. I think that you're going to see that. I think it's going to look a lot like maybe it would look like with the CBI where, certain schools will make that investment, certain ones won't. I think that the administration at UCF is smart enough to realize that, yes, that's going. If we can't make it to the NCAA and we get invited to one of these second banana tournaments, then that is worth its weight in terms of us getting better as a program. So I think you're right about that. And I think that the UCF brass recognizes that as well. And once again, it'll be fun to see both the men's and women's basketball teams competing in the NIT. Again, the men on Wednesday night at 7 p.m. against Colorado. Women Thursday night, 7 o'clock against Stetson. All right, stick around. We'll take a quick break. We'll come back with some baseball and some softball after this.
Hello, Night Nation. I'm Andrew Fegley.
And I'm Trey Strelko. Where are we? This isn't our usual spot.
It looks like we've landed in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of those guys.
You know, Nightline has UCF sports covered.
Week in and week out, we bring you interviews with newsmakers and in-depth analysis of UCF sports.
Subscribe to our weekly podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Be sure to subscribe to Nightline on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter at UCF_Nightline.
Trace, can we go back to the 1148 studios now and start working on our next all-new Nightline?
How do we get out of here? Go Knights!
Charge on.
Now back to you guys in the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast.
Welcome back to the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. Jeff, Sharon, and Eric Lopez with you. Let's talk a little baseball and softball.
By the way, before we do that, Andrew and Trace, good to see you, gentlemen. Good to hear you guys on the promo there. And let's just say this, Jeffrey. Trace brought this up in the last podcast. Football possibility contest between the two of us. I think you agree, right? We've got it. We got him, right? We're going to take him. Yeah, there you go. There you go, Trace. The challenge is on.
Consider Andrew. The challenge. Consider the challenge accepted.
Beautiful.
There we go. So folks, you can follow that. Don't forget to follow. By the way, don't forget to follow them at UCF Nightline. Follow us at UCF_Banneret. So, quick, let's do baseball real quick. Yeah. Big weekend, and a big week in general. So the Knights got pretty much handled by Florida State midweek last week. There was no question. That Florida State baseball team is really good. I mean, they are really, really good. Yep. And they showed it in those two games. But our good friend Brian Murphy, who, like we said, has joined us. He's joined the Banneret. He's going to be writing about baseball, doing what he loves to do. Old friend of ours from his days when he was at the Future, and I was actually working at UCF. Brian wrote a great column that you should all check out about, kind of how UCF baseball got exposed against Florida State and what they have to work on in order to get better. But then this weekend series with Central Michigan happened, and I mean, everything just kind of fell together for UCF. They sweep Central Michigan 21-1 in the first game. Amazing. First time in years that first time I think since 2014 that UCF scored 20 runs in a game. First time since 2010 that they had 5 home runs in a game. And the star of this weekend. So they win this game 21-1 on Friday. Then they move the Sunday game up to Saturday, and we have a Saturday doubleheader between UCF and Central Michigan. And UCF sweeps the doubleheader. The Knights are 15-3. The key with this, they win the doubleheader 7-3 and then 5-4. Knights kind of slogged through that second game. I think it was Juan Pimentel actually. Actually, let me pull up the box. Yeah, Juan Pimentel got the win. He's 4-0 on the young season. Got a little close. It was 5-3 heading into the 8th, and the Knights picked up a couple of insurance runs on a couple of wild pitches, and that pushed them out to 7-3. Then in the second game, which I called play-by-play for on UCFKnights.tv, UCF trailed Central Michigan 3-2 for much of this game. Central Michigan jumped out 4-2 in the 6th. Then the Knights got one back on a solo homer by Rylan Thomas in the 8th to get within one. And then the big blow was Eli Putnam's walk-off 2-run single that scored 2 UCF runs in the person of Brooks Morgan and Austin Murphy. And UCF completes the sweep over Central Michigan. And looks like we actually have the sound of that final call here, Eric.
Left side, through the hole for a base hit. Murphy comes in to score. Here's the play at the plate. Safe, the Knights win. Morgan comes in to score, and Eli Putnam with a walk-off 2-run single wins the game for the Knights 5-4.
Look at you.
Yeah.
Look at you. Look at you.
Not bad. I felt like I kind of vanished there for a second while I was trying to get my bearings. I've had better ones. By the way, I went back and looked at the archives, and that was the first UCF baseball walk-off that I called since 2005 when Drew Butera hit a walk-off homer in extra innings against Jacksonville. And I called that game.
Wow.
So not bad bookends considering that Drew Butera is still playing. And he was on the Italian national team in the World Baseball Classic that I think just got eliminated. But but that was another nice little note, Drew Butera with Italy in the World Baseball Classic this year. But what a way for UCF baseball to have this weekend. And the big story here, I got to get this out. Big story here was Rylan Thomas, who had a tremendous weekend, both hitting and pitching. Hitting, he was 7 for 11. He had 12 RBIs, 4 home runs. Is a National Player of the Year or National Player of the Week candidate for his efforts. I mean, he had 7 RBIs in the one game against Central Michigan.
Yeah, got robbed. He got robbed, by the way, for Conference Player of the Week. I mean, I don't
understand how you don't win Conference Player of the Week with a performance like that. And the other thing, to cap it all off, the walk-off gave him his first career pitching win because he was the pitcher of record at the time. He came in, pitched. I've got the box score right here. He pitched 1 inning of relief in the 9th, shut down Central Michigan in the 9th, and got the win. He was the pitcher in the 9th. It was his first career pitching win. So he gets a pitching win. He had 12 RBIs, 4 home runs, 7 of 11 at the plate. Somehow he doesn't win Conference Player of the Week. How?
I don't know. Can't figure it out.
I don't get that at all. But anyway, 15-3 UCF. We thought that, hey, how do you don't let Florida State? You let Florida State beat you twice. Don't let them beat you 3 times. And they didn't. This is a much more relaxed. What do you think about this? This is where I think that much more relaxed approach of Greg Lovelady really paid off, didn't it? Because they were a loose team and they were ready to play against Central Michigan. Whereas maybe this could have turned into a 4 or 5 game slide under another regime.
Maybe. I think that's no question about that. And you haven't even mentioned the fact they beat Bradley 12-9 on Tuesday night.
Yeah, that was tonight. We're recording this on Tuesday night. They did defeat Bradley 12-9. Sorry about that.
The reasons why this is a late edition, the late night edition there. That was a wild game, and they found a way to win that game. And to the Murphy story, by the way, Lovelady said that himself. He felt he got exposed a little bit in the FSU game. So it's not like Murph was calling out the team or anything. I mean, it was just kind of honest. What Lovelady said, we're kind of preaching there. But they learned from it. They bounced back. As you mentioned, they won. They found ways to win. They found a way to win the game you called. And that's the good side, is they're finding ways to win, and that's what marks a good team. They battled a Bradley team that's pretty good out of the Missouri Valley up there. And
Rylan Thomas had another 2-run single in that game, by the way.
Yeah, so it's a good win for them. Now they got to play Jacksonville in that unique weekend series where they're going to host them on Friday and then go to Jacksonville for 2 over the weekend. So that'll be interesting how that plays out. I think it was the opposite last year where UCF hosted for 2 and then went to Jacksonville for 1. But hope they can build that momentum and build the confidence prior to conference. I mean, conference starts at the end of the month. So it's about learning. And how about Tucker, the closer? I mean, that kid closing the door in the Bradley game. He was pretty good
because Bradley was knocking on the door. They scored. I think they were down 12-3 at one point.
They were down big.
And
it was a wild game.
And came storming back. Was it 12-? No, they were down 12-4.
It was 12-4 at one point. Yeah,
and they cut it to 12-9 with 5 in the 7th.
Wow.
But Bryce Tucker, his 5th save of the year, actually shut him down.
He's been tremendous. Been tremendous. I'm glad we mentioned him because I think that's one of the big things about him too, and that's one of the things Lovelady has done. He's got guys with roles, and I think everybody's comfortable. To your point, whereas maybe in the past they weren't comfortable because they didn't know their role on a given day. So,
by the way, midweek game he used 6 pitchers.
Yeah,
and
well, that's become the trend now in baseball, college baseball, a little bit more and more. We see that now where guys are using multiple pitchers, get them some work in that midweek, and get them ready for in certain situations for the weekend.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the fact that he's doing it and really relying on his bullpen, it's become a team effort instead of throwing guys' arms out. I think that's going to make a big difference for UCF down the stretch.
No, you're right, because that's been one of the criticisms with Terry in the last few years. Terry Rooney was that they would only use maybe 2-3 arms he trusted in the bullpen. And I think what Lovelady telling you here is he's trusting everybody, and he's telling the players, it's on you because I trust you. You know, it's on you to make it happen. And the players, to this point anyway, have certainly stepped up, and I think that gives them confidence going in.
Speaking of stepping up, let's go over to UCF softball. Jasmine Esparza was the story tonight. Doubleheader against Iowa State. We're recording this Tuesday night. Doubleheader against Iowa State. We both were there.
Yep.
The Knights come up short in game 1 against Iowa State 5-3, and what I thought was a winnable game. The Knights were actually leading 3-0, but then Iowa State scored 5 in the 6th. But in the second game of the doubleheader, UCF run-ruled Iowa State 11-3 by knocking in 8 runs in the final 3 innings. Jasmine Esparza was, I thought, the star of the second game. She was 3 for 4, 2 RBIs. She was hitting the tar out of the ball also for UCF. And they survived this midweek sort of doubleheader. Demara Begin gets the win in game number 2.
Her first career win.
Career win. Wasn't really expecting to see very much of her at all this season, but she's had to step in with Coach Gillespie just needs arms at this point. And Cameron Toney, who I thought pitched pretty well in that first game, ends up taking the loss in game 1. It's kind of a hard luck situation. I don't think the defense really backed her up. All that.
Didn't help her out, but she also didn't help her out. 5 walks didn't help either.
Yeah,
and,
that's true.
Give up the 5 spot in the 6th inning that kind of did them in. One bad inning. I mean, you're right. One half bad, half inning away from a sweep doubleheader. That's really the name of the game. But they bounced back, and I think that's the good sign from this young team. Remember, there's 9 freshmen on this roster, 7 true freshmen. They've all had action this year.
They're playing.
They're all
it's
playing.
The pitchers
right?
and also the position players, too.
And the big thing there was, and I go back to the weekend, for example. They got beaten up by Ohio State, a game you called. They found that they bounced back against Delaware State. They were down 3-1 in the 6th inning. They exploded for 10 runs to win that game 11-3 on a walk-off. You got to call that one.
Yep.
The following day, they were there was back and forth, a tremendous softball game against Georgia, ranked 16th in the country. The Knights come back from a 3-0 deficit to take the lead, cough up the lead in the top of the 7th, lose the game by 1. You're thinking, oh boy, it's gonna ruin their weekend. But they bounce back 30 minutes later and beat Mercer, then beat them again on Sunday. So what it's told me is after tough losses, this team is resilient. They're able to bounce back, and I think that's the good thing about this team. It's very young because you never know with the young teams, Jeff. Sometimes a tough loss or two it could tailspin to a long losing streak, and this group has battled back and they've been able to put bad things behind them. And I think that's what you've seen here from this ball club. And again, tonight, the Iowa State game, the doubleheader was a great example. You lose a tough one in that first game. You just wonder, and how about, Demara, a freshman, her second career start? You call her first career start.
Yeah.
And the kid goes a career high 6 innings, gets a win, her first career win. Always great to see. And with young people and get more confidence. And you're right, Esparza was fantastic in the Iowa State game. I think you're going to see her more in the lineup in the coming games. And it's a big, it's a good way to win it because you look at the stretch now. This is a tough stretch UCF's got now. This weekend they host number 14 ranked Baylor for 3 single game. This is old school. This is like baseball style. You got single game on Friday, 6 o'clock, Saturday game, and then Sunday, single games. And then after that, on the 22nd, number 1 ranked Florida State comes in before conference gets going against Houston on the 24th. So
what a stretch, man. This is
it's a big 4-game stretch. And, I think that's, the good news is, keep in mind, this team has already played a bunch of teams in the top 25. Kentucky's ranked 17th. They played them in the opening weekend of the year. You saw them. They played James Madison, who was ranked 12th. They played at Alabama, who's ranked 11th. They're twice at Alabama. They played UCLA up in California. So they're used to playing top 25 teams, but this is a big 4-game stretch right before conference starts against Houston at home on Friday the 24th. So opportunities to get some, maybe try to find that signature win non-conference prior to conference and really get yourself ready for conference and go after the championship, because that's really one of the goals. When you play a tough schedule, the goal is to learn, kind of get better and get ready for conference. And I think that's the challenge for this young team. As you mentioned, now with Demare in the mix, throwing some quality innings as a freshman with Tony, and then you got Aaliyah White, we haven't mentioned. It's a young staff that's going through this for the first time, and so there's always going to be ups and downs. But I think the thing is they're learning in each day, and you hope they get better by conference time.
14-10 overall is UCF softball. Lopez, when they're heading into this, real quick, when they're heading into this stretch with Baylor and Florida State, this 4-game stretch before conference play starts, do you think they're where they thought they would be, or did you think that the team looks at this and says, man, that one Iowa State game, darn it, we should have won that one. The Georgia game we should have won. We kind of ran ourselves out of the Ohio State game. Do you think they look at that and they say, if we play our best, we're capable of doing even better things down the stretch?
Absolutely, yeah. I think internally that's what they should. They could be with you mentioned a pitch, a bat here or there. They could be 16-8, 17-7. So I think internally that's how they look at it. From the outside, and for people from the outside, I think for myself, I look, when you have 9 freshmen, 7 true freshmen, I don't know what to expect. Especially, basically, it's a new pitching staff. You lost an All-American pitcher, the all-time winningest pitcher in the history of the program. 2
All-American pitchers.
Yeah, well, McKenzie was 2 years ago,
right?
And then still, Shelby last year, right?
There's a hangover effect to that,
and that's a lot of the focus. But let's talk about the offense. You lost an American Conference Player of the Year in Jessica Uvari, who was your cleanup hitter. In 2015 was the Player of the Year. She's been their cleanup hitter for the last 3 years, if not number 3 hitter or number 4 hitter. Samantha McCloskey was a power hitter in the middle of the lineup. So you lost her to graduation. You lost 10 seniors total. So not only you got to rebuild the new pitching staff, but you got to figure out to build a young lineup. And so it's this with young freshmen, you can't expect them to just kind of hit it off the first day. There's going to be some growing process that has to go on. You're a father now. Your son Connor. I'm sure there's days that Connor gets up and he's ready to go and he's behaving well, and you're like, wow, he's tremendous. And then the next day he kind of he doesn't want to eat dinner and he's making a mess of his shirt. And you're like, oh my good, when is this kid going to figure it out? But that's how they are. Everybody's young. It's ups and downs. And so you see the potential. You saw the potential, for example, in Jasmine Esparza. You mentioned some of the other freshmen there. They are capable of, obviously. They should have. They were right there against Georgia. They could have won that game. They could have beaten Alabama in Alabama. Could have beaten UCLA. So they're right there knocking on the door. And you feel like, Jeff, if they can get over, and I've seen this with teams, if they can get that breakthrough win, that's the kind of win that could just take off the rest of the way.
Yeah.
And then I think that's where they're going to be searching for in the next 4 games, with Baylor coming in here for 3, and then obviously number 1 ranked Florida State on the 22nd.
Yeah. I'm actually looking forward to this stretch because we're really going to see. I think that they're going to come out guns a-blazing against Baylor. At least I hope so. I hope they kind of play with like they literally have nothing left to lose, and and then you play well. You play up to your potential in those 4 games against Baylor and then Florida State, and then who knows what happens in conference play. So next game up will be, again, that's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday against Baylor. Make sure you're coming out to the softball complex because that's worth checking out. A couple of news and notes that I wanted to wrap up with here before we head out, Eric. Women's golf, 3rd place at the SunTrust Gator Women's Invitational over the weekend. They're ranked 25th in the country. How about Emily Marin, the head coach of UCF? She has got a hell of a team this year. At this event, Ashley Holder finished tied for 4th. Maria Balcazar finished 6th. Johanna Larson finished tied for 9th. So you had 3 UCF golfers finish in the top 10 in this event. As UCF finished in 3rd. Job well done by UCF Women's Golf and the Gator Invite. They have, and Emily's great. We're going to see things really heat up for them later in the month. They have one more tournament before the conference championship. They have the Bryan National in Greensboro, North Carolina, March 31st through April 2nd, and then April 16th is the American Championships down in or up in Palm Coast, which is basically a home tournament for UCF, which is kind of cool. And then another note from the NCAA Indoor Championships, Anne-Marie Blaney, who has emerged as a star for UCF track and field, indoor and outdoor. She turned in an All-American performance, a school record time of 15:49.26 in the 5K, and she is and she's an All-American, and that is a tremendous honor. Yeah, Anne-Marie has done wonders for UCF this year in her performances in the distance events, and it's going to continue. I think for head coach Jeanette Bolden, in particular, I think that's going to be. I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens at the outdoor season now, because now we're going to start seeing the slightly longer distance sprints and those kinds of things. But Anne-Marie Blaney is going to be, I think, a real force to be reckoned with in the American Conference when we get through the outdoor season as well. So. Women's sports, man, I tell you, I love this. I love it when women's sports do well for UCF, because it proves, how all around we are as an athletic program, doesn't it?
It really does. They've been certainly carrying their weight for a long time. The track and field back on rolling. Softball's had great success. Volleyball's had success. It's tremendous. So tremendous feat there. And the other thing I've learned, if you got Megan as your SID at UCF, you're probably going to win, because every team you see with SID wins. So
Megan Herbuck, yeah. Props to Megan. She's the good luck charm. One other note I wanted to finish up with for UCF women's track and field. They are hosting the Black and Gold Challenge Autism Awareness Walk, March the 18th, and that is Friday, if I'm not mistaken. 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th. No, that's Saturday. Sorry about that. So Saturday, March the 18th at 11 a.m. at IOA Plaza. At the track, the Autism Awareness Walk will begin at 1 p.m., and then the track meet begins an hour after that. So it's a big event for UCF, March the 18th, in conjunction with the Black and Gold Challenge, which is the only outdoor track meet at UCF this season. But it will culminate with, or it will actually kick off with this Autism Awareness Walk, March the 18th. And that's a great cause, because it's something that's really close to Jeanette Bolden's heart, and I know that she's looking to see a lot of fans out there. So if you get the chance, come on out to that on Saturday for the Black and Gold Challenge Autism Awareness Walk. Again, that's starting at 11 a.m. On Saturday, March the 18th. So good to see that going for a good cause for our first our first track and field meet of the season at UCF. So, all right, what do you got going on this week, Eric?
Got softball, and more softball. Baylor, big one. UCF and Baylor. Baylor ranked 14th in the country. Really good. They're playing their best softball right now. They've beaten like 4 ranked teams in the last week or two. So it'll be a good challenge. Very good team in Baylor. Little Fiesta Bowl rematch. I like to call it the Fiesta Series, right? A little flashback.
Hopefully we'll put 52 runs on him in one game.
Wow. That would be a story. Can we get Blake out here? Yeah, so that should be fun. 6 o'clock Friday night, 2 o'clock Saturday, and then the third game on Sunday. Catch it on UCF Nights TV, but we certainly encourage you to come out and watch the game. And big series, so that'll obviously be occupied by me. But then somehow and somewhere in between, I'll be also covering the NCAA tournament for 1080. So
big week. We got number 14 Baylor coming to town for softball Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We got the baseball series Friday, Jacksonville, Friday night. We got men's basketball Wednesday night in the NIT. We got women's basketball Thursday night in the WNIT. It's just an embarrassment of riches for UCF sports this week. So I know you'll be watching it closely, and obviously there for softball, I'll be watching it closely too, as well. So, all right, Eric, I think we've got everything covered for this point. But here we go, man. Right. This is the spring equinox. Here we go.
I love it. Yeah, we didn't even
basketball, baseball, softball. Oh my gosh,
it's my favorite time of year. I mean, hell, we didn't even just. I mean, it's a monster week in Orlando too. I mean, obviously you mentioned the NCAA tournament's going on. Orlando City's got a home game. I mean, it's and the best thing is the Magic are out on the West Coast, so we actually don't. Well, the best basketball like it's been the last 3 months, will be played at the CFE Arena. And then
probably the best basketball of 2017 will be played at CFE Arena this weekend, or probably either at CFE Arena or at the Amway Center this weekend.
That's right. That's it. That's what we got.
All right, brother. So don't forget, you can follow Eric Lopez on Twitter at
Eric Lopez Elo.
You can follow me at Jeff_Sharon. You can follow us at UCF_Banneret on Twitter. Also look up the Black and Gold Banneret on Facebook. Go to blackandgoldbanneret.com, where you can check out all kinds of fun stuff, including this podcast and Brian Murphy's baseball coverage as well. You can also subscribe to this podcast, if you don't already, on iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and TuneIn. Make sure on iTunes, if you haven't yet, leave us a rating. Tell us how we're doing. And also don't forget to reach out to us any way that you can with whatever it is that you may have. If you want to, by the way, we're trying to think about what we're going to be doing over the summer as well. So if you have any ideas of people who you want to talk, who you'd want to hear from, people who we should talk to for extended interviews for this show during the summer when, let's face it, no sports are happening, we're more than all ears on that. So make sure you reach out to us on our Facebook page. Just search Black and Gold Banneret on Facebook. So for Eric Lopez, I'm Jeff Sharon. Thank you so much for listening. This has been the Black and Gold Banneret Podcast. We'll catch you next week. Go Knights in the NIT.
Today's episode is brought to you by Cars.com. With over 2 million vehicles and 50,000 more added every day, Cars.com will match you with the perfect car for you, your budget, your life, your style. And if you're ready to say goodbye to your current car, Cars.com will get you an instant offer to cash it in. Just start by entering your license plate and get matched with a local dealer who will write you the check. So whether you're looking to buy or sell, just go to Cars.com. It's magical.